You're listening to episode 85 of Liz's Healthy Table.
Looking for a healthy new way to feed your family without the hassle and hype? Welcome to Liz's Healthy Table, where your host, registered dietitian nutritionist Liz Weiss, serves up fresh and flavorful recipes with a tasty side of science, good nutrition, and fun. Are you and your family ready for some wholesome food that tastes great too? Don't change that dial. Your food adventure starts here.
Welcome to the podcast, everyone. On this week's show, we're making plans for the holidays, starting with, you got it, Thanksgiving. How are you going to be celebrating this year? Will you be making your usual sweet potato side dish? Or, like me, are you going to be prepping and making the entire meal from scratch? And how are you planning to keep your stress meter out of the red? Joining us with simple advice for adding ease, flavor, and a dash of good health to your Thanksgiving Day dinner and beyond is Jenna Helwig. She's the food director at Real Simple Magazine, and she's the author of 4 cookbooks, plus another one on the way next year. She's also the founder of a New York-based personal chef services company called Rosaberry. And you're going to hear more about Jenna at the top of the show. Now, when it comes to simplicity, Jenna's got us covered. Our conversation was such a delight, and let me tell you, her job at Real Simple is so cool, COVID or not. So stay tuned, because on the show, you're going to get lots of recipe inspiration from Real Simple Magazine, including a side dish for maple sweet potatoes with spicy pecan praline. Yum. And you'll get a vanilla sweet potato cheesecake dessert recipe that yours truly is planning to make for Thanksgiving. Jenna's got advice for staying grounded and grateful during the holidays, and lots of tips for streamlining your holiday dinner to-do list. And if you love mashed potatoes, Jenna has some easy hacks for adding fun new flavors to your old favorites. Okay, a few friendly reminders. If you love the show, tell a friend about it, or post a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me at lizshealthytable.com, and be sure to check out the show notes from today's episode, where you will get the recipes and the resources discussed. And of course, follow me on Instagram at Liz Weiss. I'm hanging out a lot over there these days, so be sure to follow me on Instagram as well. So Thanksgiving and the holidays, I think we can all agree we'll be taking lots of different twists and turns this year. And Jenna's here to help us not just cope, but also to cook delicious meals with confidence. Hey, Jenna, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So, let's just begin the show. I don't know. Let's just have you tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Where you live, your family, where you work, kind of the whole backstory on Jenna.
Absolutely. So I always say that my main job, because I have a few jobs, but my main job is as food director at Real Simple Magazine. I started there in December after about a year and a half at Health and nearly 7 years at Parents Magazine. In addition to Real Simple, I also own a boutique personal chef services company in New York, and I write cookbooks. I live in Brooklyn, New York, with my husband and teenager, which is a fascinating adventure unto itself.
Is this a teenage boy or girl?
So my teenager is non-binary, which is, I know, unusual for many people. So we use they and them pronouns. Mm-hmm. And, I feel like I've learned so much from them as they've gone through their journey.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole area where I still need to learn a lot. So maybe we'll talk about that off mic some other time, because it's a whole new world. So thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you've got a teenager, and I've been through those teenage years, and I can feel the pain. It's a whole different, it's just a whole different world. When they get the driver's license, then I don't know if, in Brooklyn, it's more like you're on the subway, but the driver's license gets to be a little scary.
Oh my gosh, I'm not ready for that.
Yeah, I won't bring you down. Let's talk food. So I do have a strange question for you. I'm sort of obsessed with this thing lately, which is unrelated to food, actually. Well, maybe it's not unrelated to food totally, but I just attended virtually the Food Nutrition Conference and Expo, FNCE. That's our annual nutrition conference in the dietitian world. And one of our keynote speakers was talking about the keys to happiness. How can you be happy? And it's such a timely topic now because a lot of us are, feeling down, with the whole COVID thing. And one of the things he talked about with happiness was that it's important to have a weird hobby. And a lot of Nobel Prize laureates have weird hobbies and they're successful and they're happy and whatever. So I was just curious, since you do so many things and wear so many hats, if you have a weird hobby.
Oh my gosh. Now I feel like I need to cultivate a weird hobby.
You do. Quickly.
I will say, so I don't know that this is weird, but a lot of people are surprised when they hear that I am an obsessive baseball fan. I know that you are from the Boston area, so you may not like that I am a huge New York Yankees fan, but
Goodbye.
Watch every single game. I'm like super into the Yankees. And that actually does bring me a lot of joy in my life. I look forward to baseball season. I was so happy that they did play some during COVID times. I was so glad that worked out. I really missed it when, they weren't playing. So I guess it's not weird, but maybe surprising.
That is surprising. Well, I will let you know that I grew up in New Rochelle, New York, and my dad was from the Bronx. My mom was from Brooklyn, and my dad was a Mets fan and then became a Yankees fan, but we used to go to Mets games when I was a kid. So I was a New York fan there for a while. I was with you on that.
Okay, good. So you don't automatically hate me.
No, well, I do actually, but no. I was really into baseball when my kids were younger and when the Red Sox finally won the World Series, and that was quite the World Series against the Yankees. And was it against the Yankees or did we play?
Well, they beat the Yankees first to get to the World Series.
Thank you. Yes.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you know, and that was like a 19-inning game, and it was crazy. So yeah, baseball was definitely a bigger part of our lives when the kids were younger. Then they got into soccer, and off we went with that. But all right, good. So baseball it is. So let's switch from baseball to books, blogs, magazine writing. You are just in it big time when it comes to, sharing recipes with families. And if people go to your website, tell everybody your website. I shared it in the intro, but let's give it a plug again.
Oh, yeah. It's jennahelwig.com. Very simple.
Good. Well, you talk about your mission really to help people eat healthfully, happily, and deliciously. And so I thought you could just talk a little bit about your books and your blog and but then we'll get a little bit more into your life at Real Simple, because I think that's just so cool. And of course, we're going to talk about the holidays today, but just a little bit about the books you've written and the blogs you write.
Sure. So, I think it's helpful to understand a little bit also how I came into food and this career. And I really did come into it a little later than most people. I always loved to eat, but it wasn't until I was in my late 20s and my baby was born that I really started, cooking with some urgency. I was actually in the TV business throughout my 20s and then realized, as I was making baby food and making more of our family dinners, that I really wanted to devote myself to food and helping families eat better. When Rosen was a year old, my child was a year old, I started going to culinary school at night. I still worked my TV job during the day, went to culinary school at night. And a year later, once I had graduated, I started my own culinary instruction and personal chef company, which I still have today. And, the mission behind that was really to help other families, other parents learn how to feed their children well, whether that was making baby food or helping integrate toddlers into family meals or just, eating together on a nightly basis, whether it was food that I cooked for them or food that I taught them how to make. So I did that for a couple of years and then eventually made my way to Parents Magazine, where I was able to really, talk directly to these families about making healthy food a fun part of their daily life. And that's also the mission that I have with my cookbooks, is really to be non-judgmental, because I know that parenting is hard and feeding a family is hard, but to, just give them the tools and inspiration to, help make it a part of their everyday.
What did you do in TV, by the way? Because I worked at CNN back in the day. So what was your TV life or job? What'd you do?
So I did actually intern at CNN when I was in college,
really?
In Washington, D.C.
Okay.
But then I was in development at documentary production companies. So we made series my job was to develop the ideas and sell series to like Animal Planet and History Channel, that sort of thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I worked at CNN in Atlanta, and I was working in the food and nutrition unit, Nutrition News, for 5 years. And then after I left there, I just freelanced for them. So my background is in broadcast media. So we have that in common.
Oh, interesting. Yes.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know that about me because, I'm a blogger and a podcaster, and people that know me now think, oh, she's a blogger and a cookbook author or whatever. But yeah, that was my past. And I just want my listeners to know that I thought you were a registered dietitian, Jenna, because I think I must have met you at a registered, like some event that a bunch of dietitians were at. I remember going to dinner with you in Boston, right? Ellie Krieger was there, a bunch of dietitians. And of course, I make the assumption, well, of course she's a dietitian. So that's been in my head for a long time.
Well, it's funny because as I mentioned, I just really like to hang out with dietitians. I love dietitians. Some of my very favorite people.
We're a very cool crowd, and you are an honorary registered dietitian as far as I'm concerned. So you are Real Simple's food editor and not a dietitian, a food editor. But I'm just sort of curious how your passion, for health, how does that weave in to your role at Real Simple? And then what does your average day look like? I'm sure it's different now because I'm assuming you're home, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're in the office, but what does that day look like as a food editor? And how does health and nutrition find its way into the magazine?
Oh, yes. Okay. Such good questions. So first of all, my day means yes, now I am at home. So basically, I'm just always sitting on my, at my dining room table with my computer. But, what I'm doing really varies. So I oversee all of our food content. So I'm the food director, and I have a food editor that I work with named Ananda, who is incredibly talented and wonderful. So I work with her and our test kitchen down in Birmingham, Alabama, to brainstorm story ideas and recipes. I also develop and cross-test recipes in my kitchen, which is really fun. And I test new food products. I'm getting boxes every day with new things to try and cookbooks to look at. I write a monthly column called Things Cooks Know, where I get to really dive into subject about, cooking in the kitchen. Like right now I'm working on one actually talking about nutrition, about how to bake with less sugar. And last month I wrote one it's actually coming out in January, but it's about cooking in cast iron and how to take care of your cast iron pans. So one of the things I love about my job, and I've always loved about it, is that I'm never doing the same thing. There's so many different facets to it. Even in one day, I might have, 5 or 6 or more things that I'm juggling. And that just really fits with my personality. In the, as the before times, as I call it, I would go to a lot of events around the city and cookbook launches and, learning events and brand reveals. And I really miss that a lot. I'm doing more of that virtually now. There are more, brands and other meetings that I'm having via Zoom, which is not quite as fun, but, the new world. So I'm accepting it. So in terms of health and nutrition, Real Simple isn't a healthy eating magazine per se. Unlike Parents and Health, where I worked before, we don't have strict nutritional guidelines for our recipes, but we know that our audience really cares about, healthy food and eating well. They, of course, like some indulgences sometimes, but we do make a big effort as you look at the magazine and the balance of the recipes every month, that there are a lot of healthy or healthier, at least, options. And so one way we do that is we use a lot of produce, like seasonal produce. That's, in all of our recipes, we've got lots of vegetables. We also are making an even bigger effort these days to incorporate a lot more plant-based meals. So we have one column every month called Plant Powered. So there's going to be at least one vegetarian, if not vegan recipe. And in our 5 Easy Dinners, that's our most popular food column every month, we have at least one, if not 2 vegetarian meals. So that's, we're doing that because we think that it's better for the planet and, healthier in many ways. But also we know that our readers ask for that. So it's great to be able to answer that call.
Good stuff. You know, I'm with you on the whole plant-based. For me, actually, plant-based is really about plant forward. And I've even seen an evolution on my blog in terms of the way I'm always incorporating more plants, you know, into all my recipes. It doesn't mean I give up meat or cheese or anything because I'm not vegan, but I like that you're doing that. And, you know, you mentioned cookbooks, that you were going to cookbook launches and cookbook events. I love cookbooks. And my favorite chef in the world next to Jenna Helwig is Yotam Ottolenghi, who's from London. And I noticed in the November issue, you guys had a feature on all your favorite cookbooks. And I think one of your editors mentioned Plenty as which is one of his books, one of my favorite books. But what's your favorite cookbook? Do you have one? Is it even possible for you to come up with a favorite?
Oh gosh, it is so hard. So I will say that story that you referenced, it's called The Books We Cook. I feel like this is a story I have been pitching at every magazine I have worked at for years. And it was so exciting to actually see it come to life in this issue. So the book that I chose for this story is called The Hot Bread Kitchen Cookbook. And Hot Bread Kitchen is a New York-based bakery that employs like immigrant and refugee women and lets them cook their traditional breads and then sells them around the city. And it's a really wonderful bakery. The food is amazing. So I did choose that cookbook for this story, but I have so many favorites. Probably the most used cookbook in my collection is Melissa Clark's Dinner Cookbook.
Oh, love her.
She's just amazing. Everything she makes, I want to eat. So, you know, I literally have cooked out of that book more than any other. I also love Six Seasons. Do you know that book?
No, Six Seasons. I don't.
Oh my gosh. You should know this book.
I'm writing it down.
It's not only vegetarian, but it's definitely plant forward. And it's all about cooking with in-season vegetables. And it's just beautiful and delicious.
Now, who's the author on that?
Joshua McFadden. He is a chef out in Oregon, I believe.
Because it's vague in my mind. So I'm sure I've seen it. But I like that idea of 6 seasons and not just 4, because obviously, you know, what we have, especially here in New England in the fall, is so varied, because September is the fall, but late November is too. So, you know, it varies, right?
Absolutely. And with produce, summer also, early summer is so different than late summer in terms of what you can get.
Right. Yeah. And of course, right now we're all thinking about sweet potatoes and squash because, you know, the holidays are approaching. And I've been thinking a lot about the holidays, especially Thanksgiving, because we always go to my parents and there's always like 18 of us. And I'm so sad because we can't do that this year. So we're going to do Thanksgiving, me and Tim and our 2 sons, Josh and Simon. And I'm bummed about it. And we'll probably do virtual and try to, you know, get a Zoom thing going with our family that night. But, you know, I feel like I'm going to do everything this year. You know, I usually do the vegetables. Now I'm going to have to do maybe a turkey breast, and I'm going to do like a lot of things this year that I wouldn't normally do. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that, but I'm sort of curious, you know, what's your Thanksgiving plan? What's your holiday plans? How are you going to navigate it this year?
It's tricky. We're still figuring it out. You know, for Thanksgiving, we usually stay in Brooklyn and have another family or 2 join us. You know, this is what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that it is not going to be freezing. We have a little backyard. We bought a heat lamp. You know, I feel like people can bring blankets. Now, if it's freezing or raining, that's not going to work. So that's going to have to be a strange game time decision. I may have lots and lots of leftovers that we have to eat. For Christmas, you know, we usually would be going to Colorado to see my parents. And, you know, we're kind of thinking about driving out, which will be really long, but getting COVID tests first before we go, driving out, and then spending a couple weeks out there. So we'll see. We'll just see how the world is as we get closer.
Right. You know, if you do eat outside, and we bought the heat lamps too, here's my pro tip for everybody who's going to eat outside. Take your plates and heat them in the oven first. You know, just put them on 125, warm up those plates, and then put your food on it. And you might get an extra minute of hot food if you do that.
Genius.
Telling you, I've changed everybody's lives today. My husband's British, and if you don't heat the plates up before dinner, that's a major problem. You got to have hot plates. They will not shatter in the oven. Trust me. Don't put plastic in there, but yeah, you put your plates in at 125. You're going to be fine.
So smart.
Yay. So let's talk about this November issue because, you had that article on the favorite cookbooks. You also had an article devoted to potatoes, of course. Why wouldn't you with Thanksgiving coming up? And so I thought we could talk through a few potato recipes because as I was looking at it, I found a recipe. It's a cheesecake recipe that I'm totally going to make. But I know you said there was a recipe in there that you really love, the maple sweet potatoes with spicy pecan praline. Oh my gosh, that caught my eye as well. But I thought maybe we could share that recipe now with listeners. Tell them, what's in that recipe and just kind of talk us through the process because it looks like a really easy one, especially for people who will be making the entire feast. This to me looks like a great go-to.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this was so delicious. So this story was one that my colleague Ananda developed, and then I got to cross-test everything in my kitchen a couple months ago, actually probably over the summer at this point. And it was so good to get like a sneak peek of Thanksgiving there. And I will tell you, I will vouch for the fact that all of these recipes are amazing. So this one, the maple sweet potatoes with spicy pecan praline, is really simple. What you do is you just do a really easy candying of pecans, which is just cooking them with some spices and a little maple syrup. And you can even do that a day or two ahead of time. So to save yourself time on Thanksgiving. And then you roast sweet potatoes and shallots, which I love because they get so, nice and rich, with olive oil, salt, and pepper. Glaze them with a little bit of butter because it's Thanksgiving, syrup mixture, and bake them some more. And then you just top them with the pecans and some lime zest. They're really irresistible. Just so good.
I think shallots are underutilized by people. Talk about shallots for a minute. Sweet potatoes, we all see, we get it, we use them a lot. Shallots, demystify, please.
Oh my gosh. So I've been using shallots a lot more recently. And I think that your insight there is so true. They are underutilized. So these are those kind of, smaller purplish onions. And I love them for a few reasons. One, they cook very quickly. So if you are sauteing them on the stovetop, they don't take as long as regular onions to get soft. But when you roast them, they just become tender and succulent. It's become kind of my new go-to with a lot of roasted vegetables.
I totally agree with you. And if it's okay with you, I would love to share this recipe on my blog if Real Simple's okay with that, because I want people to be able to access this recipe.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yay. Yay. We're all about simplicity. I mean, that's the beauty of Real Simple, that your recipes, everything in there is simple. You guys had this online event about a month or so ago where you were on making a recipe and there was some kitchen organizer on. I tuned in. I learned a lot. So I'm totally going to be reorganizing my pantry because it's a complete wreck right now. And that will be a good winter project for me. So
I feel like we can all relate to that these days because we're all just cooking so much and, our pantry, my freezer is just ridiculous. I need to work on that.
Especially because you're testing recipes all the time. I mean, I had a recipe on my blog recently. It was these little mini cheesecakes. You just make them in muffin tins. And I do cooking classes with kids and that's a recipe I've made with them, virtual cooking classes now. And so when I was looking through the magazine, the November issue of Real Simple, I saw a recipe in the potato article for vanilla sweet potato cheesecake. And I love canned pumpkin, by the way, and I cook with pumpkin a lot, but I don't love pumpkin pie. But when I saw this, I was like, ooh, this is a cheesecake that's made with just with a medium sweet potato. And then, you make the crust, which I'm going to tell you guys, I'm going to have another true confession in a minute about pie crust. And then the filling is 2 of those 8-ounce bricks, if you will, of cream cheese, vanilla bean, and then 2 eggs. I mean, what could be easier, right? So I'm going to make it so easy. And tell me if this is cool, Jenna, if you're okay if I do this. I have a son who's gluten-free. So I'm going to use a gluten-free pie crust. The brand is Midel. I don't know if you've seen it. MI-DEL. I'll share this in the show notes. Midel, and I just find it at the Stop and Shop. And I'm going to fill that with this cream cheese sweet potato mixture. And I might do one more little tweak. And again, tell me if this is cool. Instead of using the regular cream cheese, because I am a dietitian and I cannot help myself, I might use the 1/3 less fat cream cheese. Now, do you think it will still be fabulous if I go with the lower fat cream cheese?
I hope so.
That was the awkward pause from the woman I thought was a dietitian, but who is not. Oh, no.
I really hope so. And I want to hear from you because, so all I can say is that we have not tested it that way. I would think that it will probably be great. I feel like of all the lower fat products, actually, that the lower fat cream cheese performs better than almost all the rest. So that is something that I can, in terms of flavor, totally get behind. And it should be fine baking too. It just always makes me nervous if I haven't tried the substitution.
And I'm with you. I'm with you because people will ask me, oh, if I make this change to your recipe or if I freeze it and whatever. And I will often say the same thing. I haven't tested it that way, but go for it. And then let me know how it turns out.
That's right.
I will be reporting back. Trust me. Follow me on Instagram, which you probably do. You'll see my Instagram story on this and I'll be crying over my pie, but hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Well, and I think that crust sounds great. And I am, wholeheartedly in favor of any, shortcuts like that. I actually am working on another cookbook called Bare Minimum Dinners that's going to be out next fall. And a lot of the recipes are, shortcuts, like good ones, but they're 100% okay.
Well, number one, you need to come back on the show when Bare Minimum Dinners is out, because that's my kind of book. And I'm going to take a picture or send you a link to this Midel pie crust because perhaps it needs to be reviewed in Real Simple Magazine.
Send it.
They do a chocolate and then they just do a regular. It's like a gluten-free graham cracker crust, and I do love it. All right. Lightning round. I want you to give us 5 simple ways to add better nutrition and flavor to mashed potatoes, because I know Real Simple has done I was looking on your blog, a whole thing on mashed potatoes. Mashed potatoes, we got the basics. Everyone loves them, but can we amp them up in terms of adding a little nutrition? But better yet, adding a big boost of flavor. Give us 5 ideas. Inspire us for mashed potatoes.
Okay. All right. So first of all, I love swirling in a little bit of chimichurri or pesto even. I think that you just swirl it in really lightly. You don't want to turn the whole thing green, but it adds such a nice pop of flavor. You get that herby freshness, little bit of garlic in there. It's really, really fresh and delicious. Okay, another idea, some pumpkin seed oil drizzled on top with some toasted pepitas. I like adding just a little bit of crunch and that richness from the oil. Yum. Greek yogurt, I think. So I have in the past, I sometimes add sour cream to mashed potatoes. And actually in our November article here, we add some mascarpone, but Greek yogurt is also really good. You get, again, that just a little bit of like tartness to it that makes the potatoes even more interesting, and it adds creaminess. I also like a potato cauliflower blend, which I know might be controversial, but I think that if you've got maybe like a third of the mash is cauliflower, it just adds interesting flavor to it. Have you ever done that?
I have. And in fact, I have a freebie on my website. It's a Thanksgiving hacks freebie. And that's one of my tips in that one. So yeah, I'm all for that one.
Nice. And then last, I would say a lot of roasted garlic. So I'm a huge garlic fan. But if you roast, just one of the whole heads in aluminum foil until it's nice and soft, you can squeeze the cloves out into the mashed potatoes, just mix that in, and it adds just this really wonderful, not sharp garlic flavor, just delicious garlic flavor.
And it's really easy to roast a head of garlic. Just, I always put it on foil, drizzle olive oil on it, little salt and pepper, and wrap it up. And then just let it roast, put it on a baking sheet, right? Simple, maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes.
Yep.
What temp do you typically do for that?
I think 375 would work. But you know what? It's flexible. If you're cooking something else in the oven at whatever temperature, just throw it on in.
Right. Because, and that leads me to my next question, which is really all about streamlining Thanksgiving this year and the holidays. Because if you are going to be home and not with family doing the whole potluck thing, and you have to do everything, obviously you might want to make mini portions of things, but do you have any tips with putting your Real Simple hat on for how we can streamline and simplify Thanksgiving so that we can all enjoy it and not, feel stressed about it?
Absolutely. So first of all, one of my challenges with Thanksgiving is I always want to make everything. Like I want 10 side dishes, and I often bite off more than I can chew. Let me put it that way. But I am learning to, take a step back. One of my favorite Thanksgiving stories I ever worked on was for parents a few years ago, and it was called the 4-Hour Feast. We provided recipes and a schedule for making the whole meal in 4 hours. And it really showed me that Thanksgiving does not have to be complicated to be delicious. Like, it was a simple turkey, like oil, salt, and pepper. Like, you don't need more than that. It's going to be great. You can buy the rolls. Cranberry sauce takes 10 minutes. So just knowing that every dish you make doesn't have to be over the top helps me. Like, I don't need 5 garnishes on everything. It can be simple and delicious. The other thing that I do every year that makes Thanksgiving more manageable for me is making as much ahead of time as possible. And that includes the gravy and the mashed potatoes. I always make those the day before. And that just helps me on the day feel more calm. I don't want to be stressed out about making gravy at the last minute.
I've always made this sweet potato casserole, the recipes on my blog, and brought that, like at least 2 of them to our family feast because everybody loves this sweet potato casserole. And I used to do the same thing. I would make it ahead of time, but I'd actually freeze it and then just take it out the day before, thaw it, and then reheat in the oven. And it worked like a charm. So you could just freeze those, like a casserole, like easy peasy. And this year I have a new recipe coming up on the blog I'm taking sweet potatoes and I'm going to turn each half into its own little kind of mini casserole, if you will. So it'll taste like a casserole, but it's going to be a sweet potato half that's got all sorts of fun things mixed into it. You sort of follow what I'm saying? Yeah. Like a casserole. Yeah. I'm trying to still come up with like the perfect name for it. But yeah, I'm working on that recipe right now because I don't want to make a whole casserole for the 4 of us. So that's kind of the plan. A lot of sweet potatoes that we will be enjoying this year. Of course, there's always dessert. And, as I shared, I'm going to try that cheesecake recipe from Real Simple. But what's kind of your go-to? Do you have a go-to dessert at Thanksgiving?
Well, we're pretty traditional when it comes to Thanksgiving desserts. I usually make a pumpkin and one other pie. But, my favorite sweet moment on Thanksgiving is actually that time between dinner and dessert. So, one of our traditions is, so after everyone eats, we clear the table, and then I'll bring out some like mandarin oranges and maybe some chocolate covered figs and then coffee and tea. So we have this kind of like nice moment where people have time to digest before the real dessert. But everyone always takes an orange. Like, they think they're not going to, but just having that sort of freshness right after a big meal really just hits the spot. So I almost like that time even better than actual dessert.
And I like that tradition too. And I think every family has their fun little traditions. One of the things that I like to do, which my family is not like warm and fuzzy. Like, I tend to be a little more spiritual, shall we say, than everybody else, but I will always start the meal. I make everybody go around the table and I say, before we eat, what are you thankful for this year? And it's really wonderful. My brother-in-law always says he's thankful. Everyone calls me Lizzie in the family. So he'll always say, I'm thankful for Lizzie's Brussels sprouts. Or, there's always like, I'm thankful for Lizzie's sweet potato casserole. But it really is sweet. And I think this year especially, we really have to look at the positive because there's a lot of negative energy out there. And I know in the magazine, in the November issue, you had a whole article on this pursuit of positivity, how to be positive. And I know that you probably were not responsible for that article, but just tell us a little bit about, 1 or 2 little tips for pursuing positivity, for feeling positive at the holidays.
Absolutely. And you're right. I feel like this year is harder than others, but I also loved this story. I mean, that's one of the fun things about this magazine actually is that every month I still get it in the mail because we're not in the office. And I'm like, oh, this is such a great story. Like, I feel like I learned so much from all the good things that my colleagues do. One of the tips in here that I really loved is called practice password therapy. So the idea here is that you change your passwords to like I'm just quoting here, some small act of self-affirmation. Like, maybe your password becomes like, life is good, using, different letters and numbers. Because I do find that, with your password, like, that's an opportunity multiple times a day, usually, to like have something in your mind. In the past, I'm not giving away a current password here, but in the past, I've had passwords that are like, take a deep breath. And like every time I type in my password, I literally am like, oh, I need to take a deep breath. And it really works. So I loved that tip.
I hope there are no hackers. Any hackers listening, get off the podcast.
That was an old password.
Okay.
And then I also like this other tip, to list thankfulness in threes. I thought that was just, every day to just, whether you write it down or say it out loud, just to voice, 3 good things in your life. I think that can be very centering and grounding.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I do try every now and then to do these things, and then I kind of forget. So it's a good reminder, right? Thanksgiving, especially, like we must, we've got to stay positive. And, and then of course, Christmas is around the corner, and people who historically have done neighborhood cookie swaps might have to kind of change the way they do cookie swaps this year. I do love a cookie swap. I've got some go-tos. I have these lightened up 7-layer bars that I make with chickpeas is one of the layers, ground chickpeas, which is a great one. And then I've got this almond cookie that I love on my blog. And I'm not like a huge cookie person, but that's a good one. And I'm curious, like, are you a cookie person? Is that like, do you tend to do cookie swaps? Or I'm sure you're baking a ton at the holidays, especially if you're testing recipes.
Yes. I am too much of a cookie person. Let me just be honest. And just a baking person. Yes. I love it. That's one of my favorite parts of the holidays. And, I do tend to go all out, and then we have too much and I give it away to the neighbors, and I used to take it into work. This year, I think the neighbors will get a lot of, cookies and other baked goods. And I usually will make a couple of things that I've been making for years, like even since childhood. And then I'll want to try new recipes. So I kind of let myself go all out when it comes to the sweets, but also at the same time, in terms of baking them. But then at the same time, I also really, that period between Thanksgiving and New Year's, just make an even bigger effort than usual to make sure that like our dinners and our breakfasts are even more on the healthier side than usual, still delicious, but I want to make sure that I have that balance in my life. I don't want to come out of the holiday season feeling, like a blob.
Like a blob. and I will say, I have another pro tip here for people. You can freeze cookies. I've always, anytime I've done or gone to a cookie swap and you come home with an absurd amount of cookies, I will put them in little Ziploc bags, maybe, 3 or 4 to a baggie, and I will freeze them. And then as the months go by, you can just pull them out when you're having a sweet tooth, and you've got those fun cookies there for you. So most of them will freeze just fine. Just fine.
Yes.
You see, I'm gonna get a job at Real Simple Magazine after the heated plates. Come on. I need a job. I need a job.
Interview. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sending my resume. Jenna, you have been just like a wealth of knowledge, and I'm so happy I've had you on the podcast, and you totally have to come back when your new book is out. But I know we could talk all day, but are there any other tips that you're like, I've got to share this tip for celebrating the holidays with simplicity, but also, with good health in mind?
I guess I'll just say, I don't know if this is a tip as much, but just something that I'm reminding myself that, while we're all going to miss some fun things this year around the holidays, like parties and things, I'm trying to remind myself that it's also an opportunity. It's so easy to feel maxed out during this period, and complain like, oh my gosh, I've got so much to do and I'm just spread so thin and I've got to do shopping and I got to do this, I got to do that. So I'm going to try really hard, since this year we have to slow down, to take that opportunity to be more intentional about the holidays and how we celebrate, and to really appreciate the simple pleasures of, being outside in the snow and hot tea and delicious food. So we don't have much choice about it, but I do think that as much gratitude as we can show for what we do have, speaking of myself, will just help make our holidays calmer and healthier all together.
I like that. That's great advice. And before we let you off the hook here to go back to your kitchen, which I'm sure is where you're heading back to, tell everybody again where to find you online and your social media, how people can follow you on social media, and then remind us again the names of all the cookbooks you've written.
Oh boy. Okay. So you can find my website at jennahelwig.com. I am pretty active on Instagram. I have 2 handles, at Jenna Helwig, where you'll see a lot of my behind the scenes kitchen things and real simple stuff. And then I also have one called Real Baby Food, REAL Baby Food, which is the name of my first cookbook. And there I share a lot of tips for parents and caregivers for feeding babies, about baby-led weaning, which is a really big trend in starting solids. And so that's a great place too for parents of young kids. And then my books are Real Baby Food, Smoothie-licious, which is all about, fun smoothies for families, Baby-Led Feeding, which, as you would guess, is about baby-led weaning. And then my most recent book was called the Multi-Cooker Baby Food Cookbook. And that was all about making baby food in the Instant Pot. And I learned so much. And I will also say each of these books, there is a chapter of family meals at the end. So even if you see one of my quote unquote baby food recipes on Instagram, they're often really just family food.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, my listeners will, I'm sure, be very busy checking you out online and checking out your books. And I want to wish you a really happy holiday season, Jenna. And I can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Liz. It was really fun.
This was fun. And as everybody knows, the show notes will be packed with great information. I'm going to do a blog post on at least one, maybe two of the recipes that we talked about on the show because they are so good. And I can't wait to make the cheesecake. I will keep you guys posted. If you love the show, tell a friend about it. Post a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great holiday season. I'll be back in 2 weeks with more Thanksgiving tips, tricks, and delicious hacks. And until next time, thanks for listening to Liz's Healthy Table.